Joey, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here.
You've become a great friend. We have incredible conversations. One of our last conversations was over a tea ceremony that you brought to an event that we both spoke at. And
Yep.
we dove deep into religion and faith and spirituality. And you were also the catalyst to me doing my first ice bath.
For sure.
A- a-
Yeah.
And that experience was out of this world. So thank you so much for joining and coming out to share some of your wisdom.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on and always excited to share.
Awesome. So let's first dive in because when I first knew you, I didn't really know that you were a tribesman, right? You were from the tribe, and then something came up in a conversation at a mastermind event that we were at, and I was like, "Oh, I'm Jewish." You're like, "Hey, I'm Jewish too." I was like, "Oh, really? That's awesome." So tell us kind of like your family roots, where you come from. I know that there's some people. I think there's like a rabbi somewhere in your family, right? Like an uncle who's a rabbi.
Yeah.
So tell us some of that story.
So I am Ashkenazi Jewish. I was born and raised in a Jewish family, and we're kind of very casually Jewish as far as my immediate family. But you are correct. I have an uncle who is a conservative rabbi, and then I have a cousin, his son, who's an Orthodox rabbi. So there's definitely within the family the serious Jews. But at the same time, like for me, like I came from just a traditional Jewish background. I went to Hebrew school. I got bar mitzvahed. And within that, it was this interesting thing because of during my time in Hebrew school, I had just zero connection to the Judaism. It was a cool place that I went to see like a whole different group of friends, but the way I guess it was structured was like I was singing these songs and saying these things in a language that I didn't understand.
Yeah.
It wasn't cool to be Jewish. Where I was from, there was nothing very cool about it. There's nothing wrong with it, but it wasn't very cool. And it wasn't really until later in life that I really connected to it. And that was actually on a birthright trip. I was able to go later in life. I was 32. I'm 35 now, but my uncle, who's the rabbi's wife, said, "You should go on birthright." I was like, "Oh, I wish I did when I was younger, but I had missed the mark because of 26 was the original cutoff age." And she goes, "No, they just raised it to 32." And I was 32. I was about 2 months away from becoming 33. And so I immediately signed up. Within a month, I was in Israel. And then just kind of on my spiritual journey outside of Judaism through meditation, plant medicine, breath work, all the other stuff that I do, there's kind of a thing I've been looking for as far as an internal inner peace of myself. And you kind of know when you see it within other people that you're like, okay, got it. You've got something figured out. What wisdom can you impart? And it was during my time in Israel that I was recognized I was surrounded by people that had embodied this thing that I was looking for within my spiritual route. And so then it was there that I kind of started just exploring my Judaism even more.
And we talked about when we were together, we talked about Svat, like the energy of Svat, the
Yeah.
spirituality there. Also touch on you were a Marine as well,
This is correct. Yeah.
right?
So, yeah, like when I was through in high school and college, like I needed some kind of thing. And I think that was probably where my spiritual journey started. And it was like as a high school and college wrestler, I just needed something to be so physically demanding that I was able to just get out of my head. I felt I was always in my head, and I just needed something to really help quiet that down. And so I found that through wrestling. And the problem with wrestling is that once you're kind of done in college, there's no extracurricular wrestling for grown men. There's jujitsu, which is what I do now, and I discovered that later. But yeah, once I kind of got done wrestling in college, I felt a little bit lost and I didn't really know what to do with myself. So at the time, I was an assistant manager at a Blockbuster. They were about to promote me to manager, and I was like 21, and I I knew that the pay was about $50,000 a year, and that you're also working about 60, 70 hours a week. And so I knew that this would be I'd get stuck. I wouldn't know how
Yeah.
to leave it. So I made a drastic decision and joined the Marine Corps, just kind of take my life in a whole different direction. And yeah, it was a very cool experience. I'm very
What did
happy
you
that
what did your family say about that? Because I've met probably two Jewish men who've been to any type of like armed forces here in the States. Was
yeah.
your family like, or your friends like, what are you talking
Oh,
about?
yeah,
Join
yeah.
the Marines? Like,
They hated it. Yeah, especially when I went to Calabasas High School, where like none of my peers really joined the military. Everyone went to Ivy League schools. My my brother, cousins. I have like family members that went to Ivy League school. So yeah, being in the military wasn't really a thing that we did in our family. So it was this interesting thing that in going into the military, in the process of signing up, yeah, my family was not very excited about that. But then like I excelled in it. I did very well. I graduated boot camp as my platoon honor man. I graduated School of Infantry as company honor man.
Mhm.
So it was the cool thing of being able to cultivate a level of pride within the family, of just kind of, yeah, accomplishing these things. But yeah, for me, it was just, I didn't know what else to do. I knew I needed these really difficult physical challenges. And as a young man, the military always seems like a viable option if that's what you're looking for. And the Marines definitely offered.
I love that. So, I was deathly afraid, talk about physical challenges when I first knew that you were coming to an event that I was at where we can do the ice bath. I was deathly afraid. Like I thought, like, man, what if like my heart stops? I'm going to die. And you led us through this incredible spiritual journey of breath and the ice bath itself. Take me down before we get into why the ice bath and what that's done and why you went, the Wim Hof method and all that type of stuff. You're very spiritual. Like the conversations that we have, we talk about like dogma versus spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
And coming from a family where there's an Orthodox rabbi and there's a conservative rabbi and a long Jewish lineage, where did you place that spirituality as opposed to that dogma?
Yeah, so I guess growing up that there was never, because yeah, like I never had any like spiritual practices growing up except going to Hebrew school, but I never really connected that to spiritualities. I looked at it kind of like dogma. Go to this place, say these words, it doesn't matter what they mean, just say them, sing the songs, and eventually you'll get bar mitzvahed and you have this stamp of
You get your bar mitzvah
approval.
money.
Yeah, and you get your bar mitzvah money, and that's it. And it's interesting because of just on the spiritual journey, what you often find is people that like were in like real turmoil in their lives and then went to some real deep rock bottom and were able to turn it around. I feel like I had a very different path, and it was almost like a blessing and a curse at the same time, in the fact that I grew up upper middle class. I went to Calabasas High School and had all these things kind of working in my favor. And I was able to kind of recognize at a young age that I have all the things on paper that a person should have in order to live a very happy and successful life. And I just never felt that. It's not like I felt like I was depressed, but there was a lack. There was definitely something missing within my life that I couldn't quite pinpoint. And then sports was one thing that helped, and being able to really kind of get out of my head and go deep into these like very difficult, very extreme kind of physical exercises that I knew did something. And it was something that just kind of resonated within me of, here's something very challenging. And all of a sudden, like I feel this level of peace and just, it sucks, but keep moving forward, or nothing else matters. Just get lost in this kind of thing. And so, yeah, it was this whole, like a sequence of things. And I do think it started with wrestling. I think jiu-jitsu helped cultivate that. I think even the Marines, that so much of time in the Marines is just do this. I know it sucks, but you have to do it. Therefore, it's important. And so we would be like sleeping outside in the rain, not even in a tent, barely in like a sleeping bag. Sometimes you're not even sleeping. And it's just your body is going through, I don't want to say torture, but it's discomfort, a very heavy discomfort. And then you learn to just, okay, like I'm here. This isn't going to kill me. This just is uncomfortable. And so it was within that, I touched on something that I can't quite pinpoint what it is exactly, but I knew that it was something deeper, that for some reason I was this glutton for punishment. I enjoyed the fact that I can put myself in something that's difficult and that I can kind of remain stoic in it. And I do think it was almost coincidence that the spiritual path like really opened up for me, that it was in my time in the Marines, during when I was a reservist. So at one point I would go in for 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year during the summer. And I was also bartending. And I remember I'd heard about ayahuasca. Joe Rogan talked about it on his podcast all the time. And there was a woman that had just come in, and she was trying to sell vegan stuff to the steakhouse that I was bartending at. I knew it wasn't going to be a successful endeavor, but then she sat at the bar and we talked for a little bit. And I noticed she was wearing, it was like a necklace with a vine on it. And I go, oh, what's that necklace all about? goes, oh, I do these ceremonies. And immediately every cell in my body goes like, she's talking about ayahuasca. Keep asking her questions. And I go, oh, what kind of ceremonies? And she goes, I don't know if you've heard about it. It's this thing. It's called ayahuasca. And I was like, I have heard of it. I'm very interested. I'd love to do it. And she mentioned that, like, well, this weekend we're going to be doing a ceremony. And I go, well, I was like a reservist and I had a drill weekend that weekend. But this was like in 2000, I want to say 12. Obama was the president. There was a government shutdown going on. And I remember it clear as day because it was so crazy that like the TVs were all on the news in the restaurant, and Barack Obama's on TV talking about the government shutdown. And I say to the woman that I'd love to go to the ceremony this weekend, but I'm a Marine reservist, and this weekend I have a drill weekend, so I won't be able to make it. And as the words came out of my mouth, I get a text on my phone immediately, and I look at it. It's my platoon sergeant saying, hey, gents, due to the government shutdown, there will be no drill weekend this weekend. And so there was this one of like this synchronicity that it would be impossible to ignore. Yeah. And then two, it was just like, okay, I'm interested. I want to do it. And then that experience itself also really catapulted my spiritual experience because it was a direct spiritual experience. Within these plant medicines, you go into this spiritual realm. There is a level of, you're not you anymore. You're very deeply immersed in the spiritual is the only way to really describe it. And so that really catapulted my interest in really trying to learn and discover more and to understand more.
So let's go back real quick, because I think you said something super interesting. You said that I came from a good family, went to Calabasas High School, but I still wasn't happy. And I think that for a lot of the Jewish men that listen to this, and maybe some of you, are different, but that is kind of what happens, right? We grow up in a nice family. There's money. I mean, we're not rich, but we're doing okay. We're not eating from the streets, or we're not homeless. Yeah. We go to good schools. We're surrounded by good people, but there's an emptiness of some sort.
Yeah.
And I see it in my friends. I saw it in myself growing up as well, where I would ask myself, like, why am I empty if everything was great? I remember this perfectly. I went to something called Landmark Forum, and they asked, why are you here? And people would stand up and say, oh, my uncle molested me. And somebody says, I was abused as a kid, or I saw somebody shoot my father. And I stood up and like, because I'm not happy. Like, like I felt like embarrassed to raise my hand because I wasn't going through something extremely traumatic. That was my thought. And so why do you think it is that we go through these times where we're raised in a good family, we're brought up in a certain way, yet there's still that unhappiness, that lack that we're yearning for?
Yeah, I think it goes into, like, you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I feel that people that are, like, if you grow up extraordinarily poor and you don't have anything at the bottom, if you're stuck outside in the rain and all of a sudden you're given a house, it's a huge deal. But then, it becomes very easy to take things for granted. And this is almost like, it's at this point, it's become a story that's cliches. People move up the hierarchy of needs. When you're very rich and successful in all the material ways, you get to the pinnacle of, like, right below, like, that top element. So you have all your safety, your security, you have a level of probably love that you can maybe buy, you have resources to get these things. And so externally, you have everything going on. But as I said, it's the cliche story of the person who's made it, either the athlete, the actor, who's gone from zero to wild success, and then they reach that depression. And I think that that lack is, like, there's a spiritual sense, a sense of meaning being here on this planet. And without that, you can have all the money in the world, you can have all the creature comforts, the women, the drugs, the alcohol, whatever it is that excites you, like the fame and all that good stuff. But without a level of a deeper meaning, you're going to enter this hole that no amount of money can fill, no amount of anything, like, within this physical realm, I feel, can actively fill. And so I do feel like it sends people on this deeper search for meaning, because I feel if you can get to a point where you have all of the external good stuff and you're still feeling that inside, it's going to send you on that kind of search for a deeper spiritual meaning. And I do find that you can find that in plant medicine, meditation, that there's the Eastern way of doing it, and there's also the Western way of doing that. Religion has a lot of very good answers in there, that there's a reason these books, these stories have been around for so long. And I feel when people find them and connect to them, that it's very helpful, and it does help kind of fill that void, because I think oftentimes it's a spiritual void that people are facing.
Got it. So love that. And then I want to go back to the lady in the bar, ayahuasca. You went to that retreat, opened up a lot of spiritual things for you.
Yeah.
On what point were you like, I want to put my balls into an ice bath to continue the spiritual search?
Yeah, and so there was probably something about like Wim Hof that resonated, and even before I discovered Wim Hof. So like as I've done wrestling, the Marines, and then eventually I found Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and that there was this kind of beautiful soft art element to it, that it was similar to wrestling, but at the same time that, you know, there's different tools and techniques that you can utilize to get more done efficiently. And you notice that the people that are doing it are like the martial arts mentality, that the Kung Fu movies all capture this very brilliantly, that the martial arts master is oftentimes this very stoic, soft on the external, like exterior kind of person that does have this level of wisdom within them from just a life of a deeper understanding. And I felt I found that in jiu-jitsu. And at one point at the academy that I train at, Rickson Gracie, who, like, there really is no other way to say he's the Michael Jordan of the sport really is an understatement. I always joke that he's like the Jesus of jiu-jitsu. He's so much more. He's undefeated in, I think, thousands of jiu-jitsu matches, undefeated in MMA. He won all of his fights by armbar. And it was just this kind of larger than life character. And when he came and taught a seminar at our academy, he taught some really great jiu-jitsu, but he talked a lot about the importance of breathing, and he talked a lot about cold immersion. And so with breathing, he talked about, he had a yoga instructor by the name of Orlando Connie, a very famous yogi out of Brazil, came up with a form of yoga. It was called Ginástica Natural at the time, and then it was later changed to Bioginástica. And he talked about the importance of breathing and how it can really help you relax, and how it's great for sport and all these great things, and really allowing him to stay very focused and centered. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I'd love to learn from this Orlando Connie guy. And about a week after that, another crazy synchronicity, I get a phone call from a friend saying, hey, I have this friend. He's from Rio. And at the time, me and my best friend, we turned our house into a jiu-jitsu Airbnb. And so he's like, hey, is there any way that this guy can live with you guys? I think he can help. And then we kind of talk more. And then I find out he's the head instructor of the Orlando Connie Institute in Rio.
Wow.
Well, immediately I'm like, yeah, that guy can live with us. And so somewhere between 6 months and a year, he came, lived with us. Every morning we'd wake up early, we'd go over all these different breathing techniques. And one, I learned that I can stay calm no matter what's going on. I can actively breathe in these ways that I didn't even realize I can breathe. And then even as an athlete, I was able to really improve my gas tank, because I'm now using more of my lung capacity. And also with the seminar that Rickson Gracie taught, breathwork was one of the things he talked about, and then cold water immersion. There's this documentary about Rickson, it's called Choke, and it's about him getting ready for these fights in Japan. And throughout the documentary, he's going into the freezing cold rivers of Japan, and you see him getting in, and he's just doing his breathing, staying relaxed. And at the seminar that Rickson was teaching, somebody asked him, why do you do the cold water immersion? Gave the coolest answer ever. He says, I do it to embrace death. And something about it resonated with me. So me and my friends, we would jump into our pool during the winter time, and we'd get to like 50 degrees, and we would jump in, we'd jump out. Then it became like, all right, can you last 10 seconds? Can you last 20 seconds? Can you last a minute? And the whole time we were just white knuckling it. And then it was during this time where I'm already doing these breathing techniques, I'm already doing cold water immersion, that I see a documentary on Wim Hof. It was the Vice documentary. It was this very well-known thing. And here was this crazy guy from the Netherlands taking people through this whole experience. But one, he was going through it, staying completely calm and relaxed. Two, he was bringing it to the scientific community, showing like it's not just this esoteric thing going on, that it is very good for your body. Like it does all these different things within your mind. And then three, not only was he doing it, he was bringing regular, ordinary people through it. And I watched as regular, ordinary people got into freezing ice cold water and stayed completely calm throughout the whole experience. And here I am trying to do the same thing, and I'm freaking out. And it's like, okay, there's techniques to be learned from this. And so that's when I kind of took my breathwork practice and kind of really got into the Wim Hof method, because the ice bath does show this physical component of you can put yourself into a situation of purposely putting yourself into fight or flight. And then you can tune into your breathing and actively allow yourself to relax even further and deeper inside of a stressful situation than even when you were before it, even just thinking about it. So yeah, it's been a very powerful thing to experience.
So it's funny that we mentioned Svat because when I went to Svat like 4 years ago, I went into the mikveh. There's like a very famous mikveh. It's supposedly thousands of years old. And it was June. It was like May or June. It was 95 degrees outside, humid like Israel is. Went into this old mikveh because everyone's like, you've got to go into it. You've got to go into it. You know, they rented me a towel and I got into the water and it was freezing cold. So I got out and I asked the question. I said, hey, what happens in the wintertime? They said, we get in every single day. And it's just much colder because in Svat it snows and it's. So I thought to myself, you know, in talking to you, that even our ancient wisdom, the Jewish wisdom, you've got these guys going into the ice bath. They're doing a spiritual bathing purification in freezing cold water. Every single day they go there. All these guys who study and what Talmidim, they go and they jump into this ice bath essentially, and then fast forward a ton of years, you find it through Wim Hof. So I found it incredibly interesting. And tell us, you know, when I went into the ice bath, you guys were there, you and Lindsay were there, like looking at me, and I was freaking out and telling me how to breathe. But at about 30 seconds, there was this sense of calm. Like there's like peace and calm. And even though the watch went up at 2 minutes, I felt I could have gone longer.
Yeah.
And so tell us kind of what happens in the body with the breathing. Why is it that we fear so much doing it? But while we're in it, there's a sense of calm. And how does that project or translate into our everyday life?
Yeah. So like, I feel that like going into the ice bath, even if you've never done an ice bath before, us talking about it, most people can imagine what that would be like and imagine that they wouldn't want to do it. That it does, like, you know, there's something probably intuitive about it. And then also that there's some kind of experience. We've all gone into a shower where the hot water wasn't working, some kind of level of it, of cold being uncomfortable. And we've all directly experienced that. And so now you're magnifying it because you're purposefully creating a giant thing with literal freezing cold water. And not only are you going to put one part of your body in it, or kind of subtly, you're fully immersing yourself into this thing. And I think what most people are afraid of is the fact that they recognize that your body will panic, that you will go into a fight or flight state. And there's the old, was it the Franklin Roosevelt quote, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. And you're literally going into a situation that you are causing the sensation of fear throughout your body. Your heart rate is going to elevate, your body is going to flood with adrenaline, and it's a normal part of the experience that you're making the decision to go into something uncomfortable, which is why it is such a cool spiritual practice, that there is a level of wisdom of, it's cold, my body's going to go through this thing, but that's okay. I'm making the choice to do it. So when I do workshops, I have a series of 4 goals, and goal 1's just getting in, because I do think that moving from a level of I'm comfortable in this dry environment, and I'm going to make the decision to step into a level of discomfort. So I think 1, there's something about developing repetitions of doing something that's good for you, yet uncomfortable at the same time. And then 2, as you get into the ice bath, your body will go into that fight or flight state, and your breathing, your whole physiology will completely change. As you go from calm to chaos, your breathing pattern changes. And we all know physiologically what our bodies do, 1 in cold, and then 2 also in panic, and they're the same thing. When that freezing cold creates that sensation of panic, so our bodies, everything kind of, we shrink up, our breathing becomes shorter and shallower. And so the way I look at it is like there's a whole bunch of physical benefits to this, that it's great for your health. It reduces inflammation. Athletes have been doing this forever. It's great for your cardiovascular system. It makes it actually work. That it's great for the immune system, that everything has to be utilized. So it's great for your physical health, but that you are going to purposely put yourself in this fight or flight state. And I look at the spiritual component, that you have to separate from your physical body's discomfort and all the things that it goes through. And you have to connect to something a little bit higher. And I'm not talking about connecting to God, but like the higher version of yourself that is, okay, I am uncomfortable, but I'm not going to freak out. What can I do in this situation? I can control my breathing, because when we go into a fight or flight state, our breathing patterns change, but it also can create a positive feedback loop, because when our breathing patterns change, our nervous system state changes. So most people, especially in Western culture, if you're sitting behind a desk, you're driving in traffic, most people breathe short and shallow. So most people are often in a sympathetic or fight or flight nervous system state. Chronic stress is a thing that is literally plaguing Western culture. And yet for most of us, we don't have to be in that fight or flight state, that we're not actively dealing with life and death situations on a day-to-day basis. So like that, you can put yourself in it, feel it, and that you can, as I said, that our breathing patterns dictate how our bodies feel. So when we're breathing short and shallow, our bodies will feel a little more anxiety. So we can go into an ice bath, allow that breathing to happen for a little bit, but then we can reverse engineer this process, and we can slow the breathing down, getting fuller, deeper breaths. And then within that, it usually takes, if you do this, it takes about 30 seconds. You can focus on your breathing, focus on that interoceptive awareness, and really seeing how much more you can relax in your body. Within 30 seconds, you can actually get your body from a fight or flight nervous system state into the parasympathetic rest and digest nervous system state. And that's what's the cool thing to see, is that you can go in there, experience a little panic, focus on your breathing, and within 30 seconds, you can notice yourself, as you mentioned, find a level of peace in that ice bath. And then, yeah, as I've literally watched people's heart rates go from, there's a gentleman that was wearing a heart rate monitor because he'd had a heart attack in the past. So he gets into before getting into the ice bath, his heart rate's at 120 beats per minute. He gets in, I watch as his heart rate gets up to about 160 beats per minute. And it's nothing crazy, but that is somebody who's clearly in a fight or flight state, and you can see it in his physiology and how he's breathing, how his face is, how he's holding his body. But then within that 30 seconds, he was able to get control of his breathing, getting the full deep inhales, full deep exhales. And I watched as his heart rate went from that 160 to 150, 140, 130, 120, 110. And within 2 minutes, I watched as his heart rate went from 160 to 80 beats per minute. And his heart rate before getting into the ice bath was 120 beats per minute.
Wow.
So he was able to get himself into a more calm and peaceful state inside of that trigger within 2 minutes than he was before getting in, when he was just thinking about the stressful situation.
Now, you don't just do this once in a while or at a retreat. I follow you on Instagram, and I think everybody should. Joey Hauss, that's Hauss. You have a freezer in your backyard, and every time I watch you open the freezer, I think you have a dog. Dog comes up, looks inside the freezer. You have like a mallet or a hammer. You break that the layer of ice on top, and then you and your friends do the crazy and jump. It's every single day, right? It doesn't matter rain or shine.
Yeah, multiple times a day. So usually like after I train jiu-jitsu, and sometimes that's once, twice, sometimes 3 times a day. My goal actually for 2023 is to do 1,000 ice baths, which will average to about 3 ice baths a day. Yeah, it's, as I said, I look at it as this daily practice of, we know like most the good things in life come from like you have to face a level of resistance, a level of discomfort in order to get it. If you want to make more money, you got to work a little harder, and that's working a little harder is difficult. You want a harmonious relationship, you have to confront all the difficult situations. Anything you want to do, you typically have to face a level of resistance in order to achieve some of the great things in life. And so for me, I look at it as a practice of, I never want to do it. I do it every day. There's never a day that I am looking forward to that ice bath. Every single day, it feels like it's the first one beforehand of like, I don't want to do this. Why am I doing this? And then I get in, and it's an immediate, I get why I do this. I understand why I do this. And I stay in for 2 to 5 minutes. It's a little uncomfortable, but I know I'm doing great things for my body. I'm releasing all these feel good, and you release the amount of dopamine in your body that a person gets when they do cocaine. I think it's about a 300% spike. And instead of it dropping immediately like people when they do cocaine, it actually stays for a very long period of time, and then it subtly goes down. So it's like I'm feeling good throughout the day. I'm doing something good for my body. I'm building reps and facing this discomfort and getting myself better at that. And then really recognizing, putting into practice, I can put myself into the stressful situation, and I can tune into my breathing. I can tune into how my body's kind of operating, and I can get myself into a more calm, relaxed nervous system state, and just making a practice out of doing that.
Now, let me ask you a question because I've tried the whole cold shower thing, and I feel like it's a little bit different. Right?
Mhm.
When the water's hitting you from the shower consistently, as to
Yeah.
when you get inside the tub, is there a difference between the two?
There is. So when you get into something like a cold bath, that you do develop a thermal layer. And so if you're in something like a river that's actively flowing, or a shower or a waterfall, it will be a little bit more uncomfortable because of the fact that there is no thermal layer being developed. The only problem for me with cold showers is that I live in Los Angeles, so that's why I had to go extreme and get a chest freezer and develop all the ice baths every day, because even in winter, I think the water gets to like 65 degrees or
Yeah, it's not
something
cold
like
enough.
that. Yeah, it doesn't do the trick. That you need at least, I think it's like 50 to 55 to get bare minimum benefits. But I like that thing at 33 degrees. And so it's
Sheesh.
very difficult to get in Los Angeles.
What, when I watched that Wim Hof documentary, he said something. He said, in order to not get the cold, you have to immerse yourself in the cold.
Mhm.
And so I'm gonna guess it also helps with like, do you walk outside, you're like, oh, it's chilly? I mean, you cold bath every day. Do you get cold? Is
Of
there a big
course.
difference?
Yeah, it's like, so I think the difference is just also how you manage and what your body does. I remember once I think I was like at college, and I remember there was just a day it was raining outside. I didn't have an umbrella. And I remember like that I was walking through the rain like most people do, the shoulders up, and it's like, oh, like it's raining. And then I noticed like other people were doing that. And something within me was like, why am I doing this? Like, let me just relax. And I was like, I put my shoulders down. It's raining, it's cold outside. I can still walk confidently in the rain. And so I think what it just does is it just makes you more aware of your body. I think that you're also exposing yourself to it. So it's okay. Cold isn't such a big deal. I make myself cold every day. And also, okay, I'm feeling that same sensation of cold when it's out in the weather. And now I just do what I do when I'm in the ice bath. When I'm in the ice bath, I recognize what my body does, reverse engineer, actively relax it. So yes, when it's cold outside, I'm just more aware of my body. And I think even Wim Hof talks about this, that the problem with 21st century comforts is that we get to be stuck in our head, that when it's a little bit cold outside, we turn on the heat and get comfortable. When it's too hot outside, we put the air conditioning
Yeah.
on. But there is something to being out in the elements and being a little uncomfortable, being a little cold, being a little too hot, that literally forces you to be present. You have to be present within yourself when you are a little cold. And it's just, how are you doing it? Are you suffering while you're cold? Or you're like, okay, got it. My body's feeling cold, but I'm not going to allow it to affect me in this deep negative way. Let me relax my body and just be with it. And you don't get to be so comfortable that you get lost in your mind, that you have to stay present within your body. And so it makes you just more aware of these opportunities to be present in your body, even when it is cold outside.
Let's talk about the spiritual journey. You talked about that through the ayahuasca, through the some type of like the jujitsu, through the
Mm.
cold immersions, through the breathing. What does that mean to you when you talk about, spiritual connection or become more spiritual? What is that to you, and why do you think that we're searching for more of that?
Oh, I love that. Because I think that without like the seeking of spiritual like opportunities, that our egoic self, we're only so much. We are this person. And whenever we get uncomfortable, it's like, oh, this is happening to me. But the spiritual sense allows us to really connect to something deeper, that we can connect to, that we are a cog in a much bigger machine, that there is a level of getting to explore something just deeper within this physical reality that we think of as the only physical reality. But the truth is, reality is this very complicated thing. This is a thing that philosophers and mystics have been debating for ever and ever. But within like doing these different kind of spiritual techniques, whether it is meditation or breath work or utilizing plant medicines, you do kind of get a peek behind the curtain and recognize that there's so much more to reality than meets the eye. And I do think that it's just like the worldly things keep us distracted from that. And my perspective of just like things that are considered almost like sins in the Bible really aren't that they're sins that you don't get to go to heaven, you have to go to hell because you've done these things. I look at heaven and hell as your reality. There are people that live every day that don't have all of these material things, that are living in a utopia because of the fact that how they see the world. And I think there's people that have all this, the physical things, but they're living in their own personal hell because of how they see the world and the habits that they have. And I think of like sins or things that like disconnect us from that deeper spiritual sense. I think of things when you're gambling, when you're drinking, when you're, having sex, that it's not like, that it's very just loose and promiscuous, that you're disconnecting yourself to just this higher reality that exists that can be connected to at any moment. But these addictions keep us disconnected from that. And that's why I kind of look at them as sins, that they are disconnecting you from just this higher way of being in the world. And so, yeah, just for me, the spiritual practices are about maintaining being in that higher state, my energy that I have in the world, how I interact with people, how I am when I'm alone. And so that's why I find these things to be very important.
Do you think that we're talking, you brought up psychedelics. I have friends who have done ayahuasca and they'll go back and they'll do it 2 or 3 times and they'll like have a dip. Like there isn't it's not like you do ayahuasca or psychedelic or take a cold plunge or whatever. And then there's just consistent happiness throughout. It's work. It's kind of like the opening of that spirituality, that connection through the breath work, the ice bath, the psychedelics, to be able to see what there is and then to consistently connect to that. Because I feel a lot of people are like, well, I'll just do it once and that's it. And so I also find that some people not get addicted, but don't connect to that spirituality on a day-to-day level without these things. So there's always a search for more.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yeah. And it goes like to anything could be a spiritual tool, and then anything could be abused as well. I feel that some people, their gift is the fact that they were drug addicts or alcoholics, because of that allowed them to reach a certain level of rock bottom, which created a level of clarity. And so for them, that there was a gift within that. And you can also even look at something like a gift within alcohol, that it shows you what it would be like with your life being a little bit looser, if you were a little less in your head and just a little more carefree, and that you can try that energy on a little bit and try to embody that without the use of something like alcohol. And then in the reverse of going in the other direction, that you can use things like plant medicines, ayahuasca, mushrooms, any of the things that exist, and you can totally abuse them. I know people that do various psychedelics and they do them for like these recreational purposes. They do it to escape their reality, as opposed to doing these things as a way of connecting even deeper. And that's so many people that, and this is where, the term hippie kind of comes from, of people that you can almost abuse this thing where you're not doing anything productive. You're just trying to meditate all the time. You're just trying, and that there's a level of spiritual bypassing that is always available within all of these different things. And just like everything, that there's work to it, that there's a level of integration that's required. And for me, this is like, it was even my journey with these different plant medicines that have actually led me back into Judaism, because of the fact that you do need day-to-day, like a day-to-day structure. What are the important things that you're doing day in, day out that are keeping you on the spiritual path? Because I do look at these journeys with plant medicines almost like it's an accelerator. You do this thing, you have this beautiful, powerful experience that you do kind of get in one way be a psychiatrist to yourself. You get to, all right, how am I handling these situations? What if I did this from a deeper state of love? And then there's connecting to this deeper state of reality of like, oh, like I'm so trying to figure out all these worldly things, and there's this whole other reality that I have this very vague understanding of, that I can dive into significantly deeper. And then when the journey's done, you have these epiphanies and these things that need to be changed. But then if you don't change anything, or if you don't have these kind of day-to-day practices, then that all meant nothing. That it is almost like a level of spiritual masturbation, so to speak, that it feels very cool and awesome to go to these really wild places. But if you're not making any kind of meaningful change in your day-to-day life, then that experience really didn't mean anything. That there is a way to live harmoniously day to day, and especially without these things. I look at the whole point of these medicines is to eventually not need them, and to have it be so strongly ingrained that this is a possibility of living your life in such a deep state of harmony that you don't need these things. These things they're training wheels to help you get there and to understand deeper. But the way that you maintain that is through day-to-day practices, having this kind of structure within your life of, here are the things I do, here are the things I don't do. And then within that, you get to live a more harmonious life.
Love it, brother. I think that some people who are listening might have an interest in what you're talking about. So I know that you've got a couple of retreats coming up, one in January, one in February. Tell us a little bit about the retreats. They're here in Temecula. We're in San Diego, so super close.
Yeah.
But tell us, I know it's a men's retreat, and there's, from psychedelics, plant medicines to ice bath to breath work to all that stuff. So tell us kind of what it encompasses.
Yeah, so we have a retreat coming up January 27th, 28th, and 29th. And so we are literally about to put together a February one just because we're literally about to sell out of this one. And there's been so much more interest involved. So I don't have the exact dates for February yet, but yeah, January 27th, 28th, 29th. And it's a men's retreat of like-minded men getting together that are on the spiritual journey, whatever that means for you, that it's not related to religion or any kind of thing. And there's nothing that will exclude you from that, but it is a way of connecting to that spiritual self deeper. And we do utilize plant and animal medicines. We do breath work and ice baths. And it's a lot of time also talking around the fire, drinking tea, as you said, which I found to be just a really powerful connector. And there's no wonder why like bars exist in the way they do. There is something to hanging out with people, catching a drink, and just being able to have these deep, meaningful conversations. And then we just do this around a tea ceremony instead, and just the conversations that happen from that, and just like being able to like digest and integrate some of these deep experiences that people go through as we do these various journeys through breath work, through different plant animal medicines. It's just, it's a very deep, meaningful thing. And I always come out of these weekends just really pumped to, like make meaningful changes and to just dive deeper without the use of these tools, to dive deeper just from a day-to-day perspective and recognize that you can live spiritually without having to do all these things, that there is a way to connect and be present with the world around you and just live a more harmonious life.
Love it. Joey Hauss, thank you so much for being here, brother. I appreciate you. I appreciate our friendship. If you want to reach Joey, I think one of the best ways is check out his Instagram. It's awesome. Great content on there at Joey Hauss. Website that they can find you at?
Yeah, joeyhauss.com. Nice. Hauss.
Yeah, Joey, JoeyHauss. Joey, thank you so much for being here, brother. I appreciate you. I appreciate the knowledge. Like I said, our friendship, it's incredible to be able to speak with somebody who has the spiritual depth on Judaism. And we're never talking about like the Torah or the Talmud. We're just talking about like connecting to our deeper selves every time we're around each other. So I appreciate you for that. As always, I tell every guest, may you have strength and courage to keep doing what you're doing. Thanks for being on the show, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been an honor.
Everybody else listening, join us on the next episode of the Tribesmen podcast. And don't forget to join us on Facebook. We've got a group called Tribesmen Jewish Men Leading. Until next time.